Noah's Ark and the Holy Grail are two of the most legendary artifacts known to mankind. But do they exist? And if so, where are they?
But I do believe that what I have is the original Grail.
Each year, people travel to remote locations around the globe looking for answers.
Something is up there that fits the general description and dimensions of the Ark as given in Scripture. If it's up there, somebody's going to find it.
Recent discoveries in Europe provide fresh clues to history's most intriguing puzzles.
Hi, I'm Hannah, and I have one rule. Never trust dolls, mirrors, or basements. Everything else, bring it on. And this is Panic TV. Imagine with me, if this and this had a horrifying baby raised by this. Yeah. That's a movie.
The Holy Grail is a prize sought by kings, knights, and adventurers. And yet every failed search only adds to the legend.
I think the significance of the Grail is in the fact that it is a heritage. It's something which goes back 2,000 years, something which could have been passed on virtually from generation to generation. The greatest vision quest of history is that of the Holy Grail.
While legends of the Grail are numerous, they all have a common beginning. And that beginning is an evening 2,000 years ago in the heart of the Middle East. The story is well known to Christians around the world. On the evening before his crucifixion, Jesus gathered 12 of his disciples together. Taking a cup filled with wine, he offered it up, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood, the blood of the covenant."
The Holy Grail is generally considered to be a cup or a chalice. A cup that perhaps that Jesus used at the Last Supper, or that caught his blood as he hung on the cross.
Some believe a disciple named Joseph of Arimathea took the Grail and traveled to Europe, eventually reaching Britain. Another tradition focuses on Mary Magdalene. Also traveling west, it's claimed she settled in France. This is the city of Carcassonne in southern France. With its long history, it's a popular tourist destination. But just a few miles away, one finds the area's best-kept secret, the mysterious village of Rennes-le-Chateau.
The belief that Mary Magdalene came to France is actually very old, and in fact you'll find many towns in southern France that basically are dedicated to her as a saint.
The church in Rennes-le-Chateau is no exception. In one arm, Mary bears the cross. In the other, the symbol of the Holy Grail.
There are references going all the way back to medieval times of some kind of treasure located in the vicinity of Rennes-le-Chateau. There's something going on in the whole of that area. There are various churches and buildings which have very interesting symbols and clues which people see as an integral part of a much bigger mystery.
But what draws attention to this sleepy village? The answer lies in the secret life of this man, pictured here on his deathbed in 1917. His story has reopened an ancient mystery. The legend goes as follows. In 1885, a priest named Béranger Saunier arrives in Rennes-le-Chateau.
Here he was, a poor parish priest in a tiny, lost, remote village. And when he arrived here, penniless, the church was crumbling away. It was 1,000 years and more old. And he needed to have the place repaired. So in doing those essential repairs, he decided to lift the altar stone, which was cracked and crumbling away. He discovered that one of the two pillars on which it was supported was hollow, and in the hollow pillar he found these famous parchments.
On the surface, the parchments contain simple verses from the Bible written in Latin. Yet somehow, almost overnight, they transform his life.
It was quite clear that something quite profound had happened to him.
𝐻𝐿𝐴 travels to Paris and meets with members of various secret societies. He's seen digging in the graveyard at night. Most notably, he starts spending money.
Basically, he amassed a great deal of wealth. You know, he was a small village priest, and yet he spent quite lavish sums on refurbishing many of the structures in the village.
Perhaps the parchments were valuable in their own right, or perhaps 𝐻𝐿𝐴 had discovered something else.
It's possible he may have actually discovered some actual artifacts underneath his church, and he sold them and made his money that way.
Rumors of the Holy Grail were widespread, but 𝐻𝐿𝐴 refused to reveal the source of his wealth. He died in 1917, but the puzzling story of his life lived on. Most mysteriously, in these parchments, claimed to be the actual replicas of the ones 𝐻𝐿𝐴 found inside the church pillar.
The original parchments that 𝐻𝐿𝐴 discovered have never been seen. What most people are going from when you see images of the parchments are reproductions of photos of what were claimed to be parchments.
Henry Lincoln is the co-author of the cult classic book Holy Blood, Holy Grail. He's been studying the mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau for 30 years. He originally took the legend of 𝐻𝐿𝐴 to be just that, a legend. But it was the copies of the parchments and what they concealed that drew him deeper into the mystery than he ever could have imagined. Deceptively simple, closer inspection reveals a series of ciphers or hidden codes.
All these are broken lines until we get down to the bottom where there are 4 lines all lined up. And we have the letters S-I-O-N, which are, of course, meaningful. Zion is Jerusalem. Now, when we come to this one, we have a neat block of text and what appears to be an untidy arrow with an indicator, perhaps N for north, and the letters N-O-I-S, which are meaningless, but we've just seen the words S-I-O-N in the other parchment. Simply, they've been turned upside down. For some reason, whoever wrote this parchment wants us to turn it upside down.
References to Sion could speak of an ancient link with Jerusalem. Before long, Henry Lincoln found repeated mention of a distinguished bloodline. Pondering this, he ventured a controversial hypothesis that went right back to the heart of the Middle East.
When the Grail first appears in literature, it isn't referred to as the Holy Grail. Its first reference is one simple word, Sangral, which is spelled S-A-N-G-R-A-A-L, Sangral. I wondered if we perhaps divided it in the wrong place. It's not San Graal, but Sangral, and that now means royal blood. The legend has it that Mary Magdalene came into France bearing with her the cross and the Grail. And in terms of my hypothesis, of course, she came bearing the bloodline. It was her womb, in fact, was the Grail that bore the holy blood of Jesus.
the 4 Gospels that we have in the New Testament, there's no suggestion of any actual relationship between her and Jesus other than a disciple relationship. Some of the Gnostic Gospels, on the other hand, do suggest that there was some type of romantic or marital relationship between her and Jesus.
If Mary Magdalene carried a child fathered by Jesus, their descendants might secretly walk among us to this day. It's an incredible theory, yet difficult to verify. When we return, Henry Lincoln's research leads to the most curious discovery ever made at Rennes-le-Chateau, and this time, he claims to have evidence. Each year, the French village of Rennes-le-Chateau draws visitors interested in lost treasures and legends of the Holy Grail. For Henry Lincoln, the answer to the local mystery lies in these parchments. Covered in biblical passages, they were apparently found by the village priest 100 years ago.
Some people say that those parchments are fakes concocted in the 1950s. Again, it doesn't matter whether they are modern fakes or ancient documents. What matters is the content.
Studying their hidden messages leads to a discovery that, if proven, transforms the way we look at Rennes-le-Chateau.
This parchment is particularly significant in that it's the one which conceals the geometric design on which the writing has been overlaid. And that geometric design was a pentacle, a 5-pointed star.
The pentacle has long been a symbol of truth, health, and eternity. It is also associated with the occult and secret knowledge. Looking for more clues, Henry turns to the landscape around the village of Rennes-le-Chateau.
How do I find a pentagon in a landscape? I thought about it for a while and realized that a pentagon is made up of 5 overlapping triangles. Maybe a triangle would be easier to find. There's the castle at Rennes-le-Chateau, there's one at Blanchefort, and there is the Templar commandery at Bézieux. I marked them on the map, and there it was, the internal angles of a pentagon. I thought in order to complete the pattern I should mark in the other 2 locations. So I measured them on the map, and to my total amazement, I find they were already marked on the map by spot heights on the end of a mountain called the 𝙟𝙪𝙧𝙗 and over here on a mountain called La Soulane. I had 5 natural mountain peaks which formed a perfect pentagon in the landscape. The odds against discovering such an incredibly accurate geometric phenomenon in a configuration of natural mountains must be absolutely astronomical. There was a pentagon. This was a holy place.
A lot of the problematic nature of some of this is if you're drawing lines on a map and you're particularly careless about it, you can find patterns anywhere. Now, whether they're really there on the ground or it's just in your imagination is always a debatable question.
Those who say, I choose the places to fit the geometry and ignore the places which don't fit, are merely indulging in wishful thinking. I didn't set out to find this. It presented itself to me.
If the pentacles are truly the key to the mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau, legend would suggest that a humble village priest somehow turned this secret into wealth.
Essentially what we're dealing with is a body of knowledge which was accessible to our ancestors at a time, at least 1,000 years ago, when we didn't think that they possessed such knowledge. This was apparently handed down over the centuries as secret knowledge from generation to generation.
My own personal opinion is there are a lot of things in here that are clearly fabrications, but I think once you look past them and you look at the larger tapestry of things, there's too many collateral mysteries and puzzles that are not solved by simply saying it's all a hoax. Whatever is the ultimate treasure of Rennes-le-Chateau, I think that it's not a physical treasure. It probably is something of some spiritual or historical significance. What exactly it is, I don't know.
Some believe it is the Holy Grail itself. In southern France, Grail legend centers on Mary Magdalene. But a separate branch of this great mystery follows another key character from the life of Jesus, Joseph of Arimathea. Many claim it was he who safeguarded the Holy Cup, taking it not to France, but rather north to the island of Britain. Situated in the beautiful county of Somerset, England, just a few hours west of London, one finds the ancient market town of Glastonbury. Each year, intrigued by its romantic history, tourists flock to the nearby ruins of one of the world's oldest churches. According to legend, Joseph of Arimathea arrived at this exact location with the Holy Grail. The manicured grounds at Glastonbury Abbey provide another important link in the mystery, for here one also finds the reputed burial spot of the most famous Grail hunter of all time, King Arthur. Almost 1,000 years ago, a series of fantastic tales appeared in Europe, recounting the adventures of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. Based in legendary Camelot, the knights were both seekers and protectors of the Holy Grail.
The Knights of the Round Table in Arthurian times were supposed to be spending a lot of time trying to discover where it was and recover it. That's one story. But the other story is that the Holy Grail is something spiritual and not tangible.
I think everybody likes myths and legends. It's partly the mystical element, that we don't know everything. Arthur is the great folk hero. So there is a sort of almost a wish for there to have been an Arthur, even if he hadn't actually existed. And that's the big question. If he didn't exist, somebody like him certainly did.
Graham Phillips is the best-selling author of the book, The Search for the Grail. He's a frequent lecturer on history's unsolved mysteries.
Of course, the stories of King Arthur slaying dragons and damsels in distress are obviously made up. But there is, it seems, an historical figure upon whom these legends were based. What I find fascinating is very often you will find that behind certainly the medieval romances, that there was a grain of truth.
When we return, Graham Phillips uncovers a secret cup in a remote part of England. According to him, it's the cup that inspired the legend of the Holy Grail. In England, Graham Phillips is on the trail of King Arthur and the Holy Grail. His detective work takes us away from Glastonbury Abbey and northwards to the county of Shropshire. Situated on the border with Wales, Shropshire is the home to the ruins of Whittington Castle.
The stories where Arthur's knights go searching for the Grail, they find it at somewhere called the White Castle. Now, Whittington Castle, that's actually the word Whittington means white town. And Whittington Castle was called the White Castle in all the early references to this in the Middle Ages.
Looking into the legends of Whittington, Graham Phillips researches a 900-year-old romance called Folklore Fitzwarine, written around the same time as the King Arthur stories. In the legend, Fulk Fitzwarine is portrayed as a direct descendant of King Arthur, and therefore the rightful protector of the Grail. Fulk keeps the Grail hidden away in a small chapel. Then, on his deathbed, he gives specific instructions to his family that the precious cup be hidden somewhere else. This may simply be another legend, like those based on King Arthur, but there is one key difference. Unlike Arthur, whose existence is debatable, Fulk Fitzwarine was a definite historical character who lived right here in Whittington.
This family, the Fitzwarine family, continued to live at Whittington Castle throughout the Middle Ages, and this cup was supposedly passed down through members of the family.
Graham began tracing the family tree. 400 years after the time of Fitzwarine, the cup is mentioned in another story, this time in connection with a place called the White Abbey, a mere 6 miles from Whittington. The final reference comes in the form of a poem, published last century by a descendant of Fulk Fitzwarine named Thomas Wright.
This family continued to keep this cup in their possession until the last of them, around about 150 years ago, decided that he was going to hide it.
The poem speaks of the cup being moved from the White Abbey to the vicinity of the Red Castle. This is Hawkstone Park in Shropshire, home to the ruins of the historic Red Castle. The poem ends abruptly before the final hiding place is revealed. At the bottom of the page, however, a series of Roman numerals stands out as a possible clue. Puzzled, Graham turns to the Bible. There, in the book of Psalms, he finds a possible answer. For each Roman numeral in the poem, he selects the corresponding passage in Psalms. Incredibly, the results read like a specific set of directions.
And the first one said, "I lift up my eyes unto the hills." And the second one said, "Lead me to the rock which is higher than I." It was clearly leading us from one place to another.
Standing near the ruins of the Red Castle in Hawkstone Park, Graham begins to follow the clues.
There's only one place that you can lift up your eyes unto the hills, which is a huge great cliff, which is opposite you, known as the White Cliff.
From the White Cliff, Graham is directed into a series of caves. After making his way through the dark, he emerges into a valley. The clues lead him to the doors of this small church. Once inside, he reads the final passage in the sequence.
I turned my eyes to the right and I beheld, and right in front of me is a stained glass window, and it depicts the 4 gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. And they are holding, as you would expect, the books, the gospels that they'd written. Except for one of the figures, the one who's supposed to represent St. John, is holding a chalice. I'm thinking, this is strange. Why is he holding a cup? He should be holding a book.
The answer lies in the figures portrayed above the gospel writers. A bull, a lion, an angel, and above St. John, the one holding the Grail, an eagle. The caves that Graham just navigated his way through once held 4 statues representing these 4 figures. Unfortunately, the statues were removed from the caves in 1920 by this man, Walter Langham. Yet according to a local newspaper article from that year, when Walter Langham moved the eagle statue, there was something inside. Remarkably, it was a small cup. There's only one course of action left. Graham tracks down the great-great-granddaughter of the man who last set eyes on the cup. Much to his surprise, she knows exactly what he's talking about, though she has little idea of its significance. In the attic, she looks through boxes of family keepsakes. Graham's anticipation is keen. A 2,000-year-old mystery hangs in the balance.
That's it.
That's it?
That's the one.
You sure that's it?
Yeah, that's definitely it. That's what my mother had.
Oh my God. That is incredible. That is remarkable.
Hoping to learn more about this particular cup's origin, Graham enlists the help of colleague Andrew Collins. They visit archaeologist Rosemary Arscott, a specialist in Roman pottery.
What sort of age would you put on that?
1st century AD.
So it's Roman then?
Oh, yes, and definitely.
It does date to the right time frame of the age of Christ. It is virtually impossible to place an exact date on it. All you can really go from is the style and the similarities with other artifacts.
Whether it could have been brought direct from the Middle East or whether it could have come via other areas. And again, that's something that is very difficult to determine. So I guess they're questions that one would like to know and probably would never know the answer to it.
What exact role this cup played in history is open for speculation.
It may or may not have had anything to do with Jesus, but it certainly, in my opinion, is the cup that inspired the romance of the Holy Grail.
Whether there's any truth in the story is, I think, anybody's guess. The problem is, of course, we don't even know if the Holy Grail ever existed to start with.
Perhaps we can never know for sure. The real answer may be lost in time. In the end, the quest's richest reward might simply be what it tells us about ourselves. It's a story we want to believe in.
We talk so often of people looking for the Holy Grail and whatever it is they're looking for. Well, the important thing about the Grail is not the discovery of the Grail, but the quest itself.
Many people believe the Holy Grail is still out there, waiting to be discovered. If it exists, will we ever find it? And if we do, what can it teach us? What great secrets will it reveal? When we return, the quest for another legendary artifact, Noah's Ark. Armed with the latest technology, explorers hope to close in on an ancient shipwreck 17,000 feet above the sea. June 17, 1949. Over the mountains of eastern Turkey, an American reconnaissance plane is on an intelligence mission. At regular intervals, the crew captures photographs of the rugged terrain below. Then, just a few miles west of one of the world's most fabled peaks, the camera picks up something unusual. A linear-shaped object protruding from the ice cap. If this were any other mountain, it might be dismissed as a natural aberration. But this is Mount Ararat, the legendary resting place of Noah's Ark. For nearly 50 years, the photographs taken that day remained classified. Their recent release has thrown fuel on the fire of an enduring search.
We have the tools now. We have the satellite technology. We have ground-penetrating radar. We have a lot of high-tech stuff that we've never had before. This would be the greatest archaeological discovery of all time. If it's up there, somebody's going to find it.
Every muscle in my body is tense. I love it.
The legend of Noah and the Great Flood is well known throughout the Western world. According to the Old Testament, Noah is warned that a great deluge is on its way, one that will wipe out all living creatures as punishment for their wickedness.
God looks on the earth and is kind of sorry that he made it all and says, I'm going to destroy this all and start over again, basically. But Noah is described as one of the few people who's walking righteously. So he's going to save Noah. So of course he approaches Noah and tells him, gives him instructions for what to do, to build this boat or an ark. And it gives them, specific dimensions and specific materials it's to be made out of, and that he's supposed to take representatives of all the animals and enough food and so on into this ark. He builds this, the animals are brought in, the flood starts, rain comes down, and the waters of the deep come up, and for 40 days and nights there's water pouring all over us till it covers the whole earth right over the highest mountain peaks. The flood then ends, the ark comes to rest on some mountains.
The Bible doesn't specify a particular mountain on which the ark came to rest. It talks about the mountains of Ararat, and Ararat in the early days was a region. It's like saying the mountains of this particular region. Well, the mountain today that goes by the name Mount Ararat is the one prominent peak in that region.
Situated in a remote region of eastern Turkey and rising to an elevation of 17,000 feet, Mount Ararat is one of the world's tallest mountains. Its deep gorges and icy peaks are forbidding and expansive. But could they truly conceal the ruins of a massive ship, claimed to be up to 500 feet in length?
I can think of the Bible being literally true on many different levels, but perhaps not in terms of historical accurateness. You're talking about what in other people's collective story would be called myth.
Yet many believe the myth has a strong basis in fact. Not far from Mount Ararat, the Black Sea is a body of salt water almost 700 miles in length. Today its waters are tranquil, and resorts along the coast draw visitors from around the world. Yet evidence points to catastrophe on these shores that may have given birth to the legend.
Geologists have long been aware that at the end of the last ice age, sea level came up about 100 meters, or 300 feet. And this would ultimately fill the Mediterranean first, and subsequently breach the narrow rim at the Bosporus and flood the Black Sea, which was formerly a series of shallow lakes. So this is something that would get louder and louder, and the flow would increase dramatically over a very short period of time. It's been projected that you could hear this from 60 miles away. It's possible that the Black Sea flood has served as an origin for the story of Noah's flood. It would definitely appear to be the end of the world for people who lived in the region.
Yet for those who take the Old Testament account at face value, Noah's flood was not simply a regional event.
They found a flood, but it wasn't the big one. The very purpose of that flood was to wipe out the world that existed in Noah's day. This was a global flood, a world restructuring flood.
Few people have done more research into the notion of a global flood than geologist David Phillips. He considers himself a catastrophist, a scientist who believes that the Earth's surface has been transformed by sudden violent events.
Perhaps when we look at geological formations, we should not assume that they were slow and gradual over time, but rapid deposition of sediments and catastrophic deposition of fossils are probably a better way to look at what we see.
According to David Phillips, one example is found right here at Petrified Forest National Park in Arizona. Just 50 miles from the border with New Mexico, the park encompasses nearly 100,000 acres of land and is home to the largest collection of petrified wood on the planet.
What we find here at Petrified Forests are tens of thousands of fossil trees on the surface. The notion of this having been a forest is not possible based on the evidence. There's no soil horizons, there's no root systems. There's also great directional orientation of the logs that shows raging currents. This demonstrates that these trees were ripped up from their original location and washed into location hundreds or thousands of miles away. There was a catastrophe on a worldwide scale, that this is only local evidence of that event, that the world that then was destroyed by water deposition and obliterated in mass.
Catastrophists like David Phillips are on the fringe of mainstream science. Most geologists point out the difficulties in tying regional floods together.
When people point to evidence of global catastrophes such as Petrified Forest or Dinosaur National Monument, in a way, they're correct. The dinosaur remains found at Dinosaur Monument are flood deposited, but they're river deposits. So you could say, well, that certainly was a flood. It was 150, 160 million years ago, but in a small river channel.
Since proving a worldwide flood is difficult, some Noah's Ark believers focus instead on the search for the remains of a great ship. When we return, we look at this intriguing formation. Some think the biblical mystery has already been solved. The search for Noah's Ark attracts people from around the globe. But far from the mountains of Turkey, in the small town of Cornersville, Tennessee, Richard Reeves believes the Ark has already been located. Richard is the president of Wyatt Archaeological Research. That means preserving the memory of one of the boldest archaeological claims of the 20th century. Located 18 miles to the south of Mount Ararat, the large structure is named 𝙬𝙬𝙀, after the army captain who first noticed it. Its uncanny resemblance to a large ship is hard to ignore. According to the Old Testament, the length of Noah's Ark was 300 cubits, just over 500 feet by modern measure.
It worked out 298.5 Royal Egyptian cubits, so it was right on the money, 300 Royal Egyptian cubits.
John Baumgartner works as a physicist at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. A believer in the biblical account, he was intrigued enough by Ron Wyatt's work to join him on an expedition.
I felt like the site deserved some careful attention. Here you had a boat-shaped feature, roughly the dimensions given in Genesis for the ark, in the region where the Bible indicated, in general terms, where the ark landed.
In 1985, Ron Wyatt employed a metal detector at the site, hoping to get a glimpse of what lay beneath the topsoil.
We used red plastic tape to mark the site and claimed that these lines represented internal structure of what he believed was a boat underground.
The Turkish government dedicated the 𝙬𝙬𝙀 site as a national park, proclaiming that Noah's Ark had been found. John Baumgartner, however, is not convinced. In some of the drilling he witnessed, bedrock turned up too close to the surface.
I had to conclude that this was a natural formation. There was no room underground for any boat, and that, coupled with a lack of human artifacts in the region, to me, I was confident in the conclusion that this was not the site of Noah's Ark.
We'd like to do some excavation. For years and years, people have said a decision cannot be made until excavations are done. Well, one of our biggest obstacles in proving this is Noah's Ark is to get permits from the Turkish government. We believe that with just minor excavations, we can prove that the structure there is not natural, but that it is man-made.
Many Noah's Ark enthusiasts believe the site at 𝙬𝙬𝙀 is a false lead. They turn their attention back to the namesake of the biblical region, Mount Ararat itself.
If it's there, it's been protected somehow either by the glacier or the volcanic ash.
Most intriguing is the number of people in the last 200 years who claim to have seen something unusual in the mountain's highest reaches.
The thing that convinces me that something is up there is that all of these eyewitnesses, none of whom knew the others and their stories are not related, not repeating something they've heard, all of them tell the same basic story. They describe it in the same fashion as a long linear barge, rectangular in shape with a catwalk on the top in a very rugged area of the mountain. This just convinces me something is up there.
With so many reported sightings, the long barge-like structure should be easy to locate. Yet Mount Ararat's unstable nature poses its own unique challenges.
The mountain just changes daily, and so if you've got one interesting site, you go there, you don't see it, you go back the next year, it's different, and something might be visible on another year that wasn't before.
Many believe that if Noah's Ark is hidden on Turkey's Mount Ararat, it must be well concealed near the top. Based in Pinedale, California, Dr. Charles Willis is no stranger to the mountain's unstable ice caps. In 1988, as president of the Ancient World Foundation, he mounted an expedition in search of Noah's Ark. It was one of the first to apply modern technology near the summit.
We went to the mountain and we said, well, if it's hiding under the ice cap, we've got to explore the ice cap. So we had a metal detector, we had an under ice radar system, and we had an ice drill.
Our ultimate goal was we drill down into the deck of the Ark.
The target for the expedition was the Eastern Plateau.
To get a team there, have a base camp at 13.5, then shove all your gear up 3,000 feet to a high camp at 16.8 was a difficult undertaking.
Once established, the team crisscrosses the surface of the plateau, dragging the radar system back and forth, hoping to locate any unusual structures buried beneath. A number of anomalies appear, creating some interest around the radar. But they turn out to be cracks in the ice.
The cracks are fractures in the ice caused by the ice movement.
We did a radar search of the Eastern Plateau, and we drilled 3 holes 40 feet deep. We also radared all the way over to the peak, and there's nothing there. Radar profile is negative, just shows ice. There's nothing in the Eastern Plateau site except 80 feet of ice. I guarantee it.
𝐋𝐞𝐠𝐞𝐧𝐝, however, believes that Willis's expedition is hardly the end of the story. As president of Ark Imaging, a Christian organization devoted to solving biblical mysteries, he hopes to return to the ice cap as soon as possible and finish the job.
But they only surveyed one small area, the Eastern Plateau, but they stopped there, and they did not finish the task and complete the work of the entire ice cap.
The most recent developments in the quest for Noah's Ark is the appearance of this unusual formation, located 1 mile from the summit. Taken in the 1940s and recently declassified by the Defense Intelligence Agency in the United States, the photo shows a large linear shape at the edge of the Western Plateau. The release of the photos has prompted a new wave of research and planning. However, due to political tensions in the region, getting a closer look has proved difficult.
We've not been allowed to go back to the mountain all through the 90s, but it looks like it's going to start to open up again, and maybe soon somebody will get on there.
If something is uncovered at the top of Mount Ararat, it would be a great archaeological find, but its meaning would vary from person to person. For skeptics of the Bible, it would only be a starting point, the beginning of a quest.
Ideally, scientists are open-minded, so we'd have to take a look at the evidence, and if the evidence is such that there's an ark on the top of the mountain, then I'm willing to change my views. But I would probably doubt that it'll be found.
For believers, however, it would be a validation of faith. It would be seen as proof of an entire history set down thousands of years ago in the book of Genesis.
I believe it's not myth or legend, but it's real history.
If we were to find the Ark, this would be just overwhelming front page headlines kind of news that, yes, Noah's flood really did happen.
Despite little evidence, the idea of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood still captivates people around the world. Like the Holy Grail, it draws adventurers on a quest. And as long as there are places and puzzles left to explore, the search will continue and the legends will endure.
If you could rewrite that ending, how would you change it? Go full director in the comments below.